Great. Okay, so Gillies Kleboe,
Yeah.
welcome to only our third You Understood podcast. It is terrible weather outside. And before we even get into it, I've got to say to everyone, I have been looking forward to this since the moment you said yes. And a bit of background, I guess, on us is many a time have we walked in nature and had real deep and meaningful. So I guess audience warning is it might go a bit deep, right? But try and keep me high level. But many a time we've done that, and personally, that has been in some pretty tough times for me, and I have hugely benefited from that interaction in a really difficult time in life. So we've had subsequent chats where I'm in a better place, and it's always been positive. And we can get into the impact, I think, later on that people can have on other people, but hugely beneficial. And so personal thank you and a public thank you for just being there, right?
Thanks, man.
Means a lot. The second thing, I'm going to invade your personal space now because we're going to have a hug.
Cool.
And we're going to have a hug because I dropped you a note this morning saying, can't wait to see you. And several minutes later, I noticed a couple of missed calls. And you said, are we doing something today? And it is all on me. So do not give me anything in life to organise because quite clearly I can't. But you have moved, again, heaven and earth to be here. And I really appreciate that. So hug it in. Thank you. So for the audience then, I know you pretty well, cool. But who are you? Tell the audience who you are and what you're about and what you do. Just give them a bit of insight.
Okay. So I grappled with this question through lockdown, and I was beginning to wonder, who is this guy? And I think I've come to the conclusion that Gillies Kleboe is the egoic part of me, right? So it's the part of me that has all the past experiences, all the anxieties around maybe the future or the excitement around the future. And it's this kind of arrangement of thoughts and patterns that creates Gillies Kleboe. And then there's this other dimension, I think, which is the being part of me, which is the little fragment that I am that's been split off from the one life that governs everything. Some call that God, Jesus Christ, Vishnu. I mean, I'm sure there's multiple names and labels, but I can see it as one thing. It could be a force, could be an energy, but I embody some of that, and that's my core being. So I see myself, so Gillies Kleboe in an easy way is two of these things. It's the form, the part of me that you can see physically, and it's the formless, the part of me that's part of a much greater whole. And that's how I see it now. I've really lost interest in what people do for a living, for example. I just can't get myself that excited about it. And I'm just eager to connect with the parts that are underneath a lot of the kind of surface labels that are applied to me and to other people. And
okay, so a couple of things, and I did warn everyone, right? We're going to get deep here, right? So, and it depends on your perception.
There's nothing new. There's nothing new,
There's
right?
nothing new. So I guess the first question I have, and maybe some of the listeners have, is has there been a friction between those two versions of you, or are they in unity and are they aligned in terms of how you experience life?
Wonderful. That's actually a really good question. I think initially there was a huge friction, and there still is friction today. But the way I look at it is that my job in life is to try and bring those together into unity. So the ego and the being part of me can both live together in a sort of harmony, as opposed to there being a friction. So when what I found over the last few years was it was like living at home is like this massive pressurized sort of container of having to get things done, having to have a lot of empathy, having to find space for myself. I mean, everyone experienced it. And I'm so grateful for it. That's the funny thing. I wouldn't have had it any other way. And what's great about it is it really forced me into being present. It forced me. It was like you need to figure something out here because that external world is doing what it's doing, right? You're getting told to stay in the house. Deal with it. How are you going to deal with that? So I had to go inside. So for the first time, I had to start going inside. And that's when I started to discover this rich depth, this limitless rich depth that I can call on at any time that gives me this real deep peace. And my ego went, whoa, hold on a minute. I'm in the driving seat here. I've been keeping you safe for, a long time. What are you doing? And the last few years have been the reconciliation of that battle. And now I'm at a place where I can see the benefits of my ego and I can see the benefits of my being and I can see the drawbacks of both. And that awareness has allowed me to sort of unify them a bit better. But it's a process and it's a journey and it's never a destination. I would never come along and say, oh, that's me. I know, my ego and my being are unified and that's great and I'm going to skip off into the sunset to you or whatever. So yeah, it's a good question. I think.
So you're not heading in a particular direction though. You're just experiencing what you experience.
Well, that's where all the anxiety for me had come from in my life, was trying to be in the future state based on the past state. Yep. And actually, it's almost like the distance between those two things is the gap of anxiety that I experienced.
Lovely way to describe it.
That's how I feel about it. In my day-to-day life, I'm a headhunter.
Okay.
And what that involves is placing a lot of people into work. And what I've seen from that process is the difference between someone who goes to work and has a great time and someone who goes to work and has a terrible time seems to be that who they are at work and who they are at home are the same. So they go to work and they're the same person at work as they are at home. And so they don't experience, there's no gap in who they are.
Yep.
Whereas people who go to work and have a terrible time seem to go and the person they are at work is very different to who they are at home. And that gap is what I think is workplace stress. So I see that as a sort of model for myself. And so that gap has very much shrank down to, and the reason it shrank down is because I'm more present than I am worried about the past or worried about the future or whatever.
And isn't there something in there, maybe not, but isn't there something in there about sort of destination as it relates to ambition and comparison of others and where maybe self-pressure, as in where you feel you ought to be. So isn't there something in that gap that is about looking outside one direction into everything, into the world that's noisy and all around us, versus I think more what you're talking about, which is kind of more introspection and being aware and more self-conscious of one's self and how content, how happy or discontent one is. But if you're able to be more introspective, surely you're more aligned to your own self, your self-being, right?
Well, I think this is where it's a practice. So what I've done a lot more recently is I kind of stop a lot more. We talked about this a little bit. I pause a lot more.
Yep.
I never used to pause. I used to just sort of go from one activity to the next activity to the next activity. And I never actually built any time in my day for any reflection. And I think now what I'm doing is I'm very consciously aware that, every 3 hours or so, I want to just stop. And I want to just go, hold on a minute, is this the best use of my time? Is this what I'm doing today? Does this align with who I am? Is there something? I'll notice if I'm not doing good work at something, it's probably because there's a conflict with a value or there's a conflict with a principle.
Yep.
So there was a lot in what you said, and I don't want to try and unpick everything from it.
Yep.
But effectively, it's taking the time for me to just reflect more, allows me that introspective moment. That introspective moment allows me to then make better judgments on what I should do in the coming day or hour or week.
So are we getting to the crux of it actually quite early? So when people, I'm sure, as I do myself, hear you talk about learning to insert windows of reflection into your day-to-day life, I'm sure that people are saying, oh, so easy to say, Gillies, right? So easy to say. You have no idea what is going on. I've got this to do. I've got school runs to do. Work's a nightmare. I've got I've got bills to pay now. Or the finances are all over the place. And you're talking about, finding time for reflection. What planet are you on, right? And so the question I have is how, because I completely agree that those pauses and those time to reflect are so vital for keeping somebody's mental health in check for themselves. They're vital. But you try and have that conversation with someone when they've got this life, this noise going on around them, and they'll look at you like you've got two heads, right? So how did you get there just through that process of lockdown, or was it something you knew you had to do and you've just found this discipline of inserting these little windows to help you? Because I've no doubt it's an enormous help and it grounds you and it keeps you who you are. But just talk about that for a second, because I'm sure you have this conversation with a large number of people and they're all looking at you like la la land.
Yeah. It's easy for him to say.
Easy for him to say.
Easy for him to say. So, have you ever heard the quote, nothing real can be threatened?
I have not.
Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. You heard that before?
No.
So this is, I can't recall the text it's from. It's a relatively famous quote in among, I guess the spiritual seeking community, which I'm not a member of, but it's certainly one that I've heard through the teachings of Eckhart Tolle, who I'm a big fan of. So nothing real can be threatened really effectively sort of speaks to, and nothing unreal exists. It's really just it's a sort of, it's kind of saying all of this isn't really that important. I might think that earning the money, the school run, the busyness, the working hard, I might believe all these things to be deeply important. And it's just another perspective, but I'm not convinced it's all that important. When I've gone inside into the depth, the limitless depth inside my own person, my being, and I've dwelled there for any length of time, the satisfaction, the peace, the calm, the happiness, the joy that emanates is unparalleled and not found anywhere else. So I feel like what most people experience, and I include this in myself, is a little bit of trickery, and it's not really, I'm seeking joy and fulfillment in things external to me that will always be temporary.
Yes.
And actually, what I really want to experience is this depth again, this limitless peace inside, and actually all of those other things then take their right place.
Yep.
And that's the way round I look at it and feel about it and experience it. And so I get that somebody might go, easy for you to say, Gillies, I'm so busy. I don't have time for these windows of reflection or moments to pause or anything. But I just think that's the ego talking. And I think that if someone wants to make an excuse to ultimately not benefit themselves, that's okay with me. I don't actually judge that or hold any issues with it. But if someone's genuinely feeling like there's something missing in life, and I felt that way, this is what's worked for me.
Yep.
And I wish everyone could feel it.
It's really powerful. And I think as soon as you started to articulate the joys that you experienced from that introspection, immediately everyone's saying, I want some of that, right? But that's part of the narrative as well, isn't it? Because the way I'm replaying what you just spoke about there is that I see it very similarly, but perhaps different, perhaps aligned. I think that humanity has become more lost with itself because it's not connected. And we're not connected to things that we've spent millions of years evolving in, like our environment, as just one example, but the relationships that we have. Lots of other examples where there's millions of years of evolution behind it. And within the last 100, it's literally been turned upside down, and we're all trying to figure out how we cope with that speed of change. But how I see it playing out in the world that I look at is that because of that, or those unfulfilled gaps and those questions that people have, they look externally and apply no real consciousness to looking at kind of sparkly things. And when I say sparkly things, I might mean, objects or things like new cars, or a holiday will fix everything, or you'll do as my next relationship, without any real feeling or thought behind what it is that's actually missing for them. And one of the things, and we'll move on to You Understood in a minute, but one of the things that we really want to set out to achieve in some part, because there is no silver bullet with You Understood, is just helping be a part of that self-discovery, and that alignment with one true self. So that's critical, I think. You can't replace gaps and questions without real thought and consideration behind what it is that makes you tick. And until you can understand that, then looking externally is, in my opinion, a waste of time. You might get a short-term hit from it, which may last a day, a week, even 2 or 3 years, but ultimately that gap will remain because you haven't addressed it. So I think there's similarities in what we're saying. But yeah, very profound, right?
Well, I mean, I think innately most people know this. I think innately we know. I get the feeling that it's well understood, but there's just this part of us that gets in the way, this kind of desire for activity and busyness that gets in the way, and I think it's probably the same gap that you're talking about. It's the gap between the evolution of our species and what we've just only recently put ourselves into as a sort of construct. Our environment is completely different, and we're really living very far away from our evolution, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, which I've talked about. So
I was reading something the other day, and I love the fact that you can recall people and quotes, and I'm kind of lost in this world of I read something the other day. So I read something the other day, and it was talking quite legitimately and backed by real data around humanity actually being in the best place it's ever been. So when you look at data as it relates to, for example, poverty, the global population has never been so financially rich and capable, and that includes the whole of the global population. When you look at things like health, we've never ever been in a scenario where just the other day I saw the malaria vaccine that's come out, and these leaps forward in progress. So there are lots of measurements where humanity is profoundly enriched, but conversely, I think that's caused all sorts of issues. And one of the conversations I had around that was when you try and connect those two and think, well, why? Why is there this deficit in consciousness and mental health? Why are we seeing mental health becoming a real and ever-increasing problem? One of the answers I got back was it's expectation. So even if you go back 100 years and you talk to grandparents, their expectation of life was actually lower than we experience it today. And so words like stoic and stiff upper lip and you just accept things and get on with it, they were all prevalent because the expectation was lower. This is the answer I got. But now our expectation is here with life, so we're not as robust, we're not as resilient as we once were as a species, and therefore it doesn't take a lot now to knock us off track and throw us into a wobble. I wonder what you think of that.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So there's an author, Nassim Taleb, who has a book called Anti-Fragile.
Okay.
Have you heard of the concept Anti-Fragile?
No.
So what he's saying effectively is that we have, say you have a state which is fragile,
Mm-hmm.
and many people would say, okay, so what's the antonym of fragile? Oh, it's resilient,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, great, but actually, technically it's not. Technically, it's anti-fragile. And an anti-fragile system is different. An anti-fragile system is one where if you apply a stress, there is a response, and that response makes the system stronger. So it's not just about resisting something,
Yep.
it's about actually making that system better.
Yep.
And a human being is a fantastic example of an anti-fragile system. So, you know, I believe in evolution personally. I believe it's a credible theory. We have a lot of good evidence for it, I believe. So, you know, how did a human being go from becoming potentially a monkey in a tree to an apex predator? You know, basically the dominant species on the earth. And that must have contained an element of anti-fragility. We must have had to put ourselves in situations that were new, cold, hot, sparse, or reduced access to food, reduced access to water, whatever it might have been, but we've adapted effectively
Yep.
over time. And so we've changed as a result, and you know, we dig up humans from a long time ago and they look different to how we look now and on all that stuff. And brain size has been an interesting one. So, you know, it's gone from sort of small, you know, whatever, few hundred cc's up to sort of 1400 cc's. Actually interesting, the last 100 years, brain sizes shrank very slightly. And I don't think there's great evidence for it, great data for it, but it's something I've read about, and somewhat makes a little bit of sense, I think, given our changes in diet. But the thing that really interests me is this anti-fragility concept. And what I think is happening, if I could sum up the human race, which is a terrible thing to do, but if I could sum up what I think I see, it's a movement away from, or a fear of anti-fragility.
Mm-hmm.
And effectively that, you know, I'm not going to remember this one.
Okay.
I saw a news article from China about how the younger population is now, they've got a phrase, one of it's like lying down, and basically what it means is at work people are refusing to put themselves through stressful situations. And there's a more pervasive phrase that's come out, and I can't recall what it is, mm-hmm. but effectively what they're saying is we've had enough. We don't want to work all the hours that our parents
Yep.
worked. We don't see the point in any of that.
Yep.
We don't enjoy it. It's not fun to do. We don't want to do that. I see the benefit of that. I see
Mm-hmm.
the, you know, I think, you know, what are we marching towards? Why are we all getting busier? What's the purpose of that?
Yep.
But at the same time, I still believe that the human system needs some stresses.
Yes.
Because without the stresses, I'll tell you, I'll give you a personal story. So after university, I did not know what to do with myself. I went to America and sold study guides and Bibles door to door.
Wow.
4 months. And basically every Wednesday I'd sit down and cry, pretty much.
Cool.
Every Wednesday, it was almost like clockwork. I'd sit down and I'd probably sob for a good couple of hours just to get the kind of visceral nature of this door-to-door rejection out of my system. Now, I took that very personally. And these days I'd never take that personally, that rejection, going door to door, trying to sell something to someone who hasn't asked for you to be there and probably has absolutely no desire for you to be at the front door. But what it did do is that stress actually built me up, and it helped me to then go into the working world when I started to work and realize, Lord above, this is easy. Mm-hmm. This is very easy compared to going door to door for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for 4 months straight. This is really easy. And that perspective, put myself through that trial, and that perspective has made a lot of my life a lot easier than I think.
Adversity, they say some of the top athletes in the world will put themselves in very stressful, difficult situations because they recognize, and it may be innately, but they recognize that stress enables them to grow and enables them to be different and competitive. Mm-hmm. It's I couldn't agree more. So the question going through my mind though is why do you think we're now backing away from those stressful situations? So I can see the logic, for example, in saying, what's the point? Right? So for me, that's, I guess, a higher level of intelligence around questioning the purpose of just doing things, stress or not. So you could argue that's a positive move, and I think many do. But unless you're in challenging situations, unless you're enduring stress, I spoke to names drop here. This is one of the names I can remember because it was visual. But I was on a conference call with Sugar Ray Leonard, the boxer.
Wow!
And I was starstruck. And
nice.
but I asked him about what he felt made an average boxer a great boxer that could win world title fights and win Olympic gold medals. And his answer was the ability to endure pain. That was his answer. That's the difference. So if you can endure pain, it puts you on a different threshold, a different capability to the average human. So there's something I think that's pretty similar. But why do you think we're kind of backing away from those difficult scenarios now?
So I'm going to give you an answer that I think won't be very popular, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or it might sound a bit quack.
Okay.
Does that sound?
Yeah, love it. Love it.
Will we go there?
Yeah, do it. Absolutely.
Let's go there.
Do it.
Let's go there.
Do it.
So I look at the human being, look at myself, and I look at the inputs.
Okay.
So what can I do? I can eat food, I can drink water or drink liquids, I can read things, I can touch things, I can smell things, I can taste things. So there's only a few kind of inputs, really, right? And you can count them on two hands, really, right? I think a huge part of the reason why people are moving away from anti-fragility and moving away from stressors is because the human system itself is depleted. So if you imagine take the glass, right, and the glass is full with resources, then I can drink half the resources or use half the resources, even better, and I still got half left. But if I take the current half full glass and and take all those resources out, half of those resources, same amount of resources I'm taking, but now there's nothing in that vessel, there's nothing left.
Yep.
Then naturally that's extremely stressful for that. If we imagine that's a human, that's extremely stressful, right? So about 3 years ago, I changed my diet, and I've talked to you about it, and I became carnivorous. So I cut out a large amount of plants from my diet. I basically went through about a year of not eating virtually any plants at all. I know it sounds completely wacko and against the current medical guidance and what the NHS might tell you. But I was in a situation where I'd done my research and I felt it was a good idea to try something new. I'm big on trying stuff. I'm not a big fan of trying to second guess everything. I think give it a whirl. If experience it, right? And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. That's okay. It's fine. The benefits I received from that were incredible, and I believe are the reason why I'm able to do what I'm able to do. So what I've done is I've taken very nutrient dense food with very low toxicity, because plants contain toxins. It's not a belief system. They do. They've got chemical defenses to prevent excessive predation. And what I've done is I've basically taken my system, and from halfway, I've filled it up, at least to 95%, I believe. And the reason I believe that is because if I look at the human brain, it's a very resource, energy hungry thing, and it needs a lot of nutrients, particularly micronutrients. B12 is a big one. I think the hormone vitamin D is another big one. And so what I've done is my reserves are so high that now when I'm in a situation that might be deemed stressful, I don't experience the same levels of stress I used to experience. And it's been a really big eye-opener for me. I sort of don't believe it in a way, and I'm wondering if it's all problems are multivariate, and I'm wondering to what extent diet's been important. But I think for me personally, if I was to put a percentage on it, I'd say about 80% of the reason why I'm able to handle the stress in my life is because of what I eat.
But it feels too good to be true.
And it's certainly the opposite of the story that I've been told my entire, waking life.
Yep.
And I say waking life because that's what it feels a bit like. Is a lot of my life I was asleep. I was relatively asleep at the wheel. There was somebody driving, but it was kind of half eyes shut and sort of, all over the road.
I think that's how most people feel.
And the several things happened combined. I've howled at the moon. I've ran around a fire naked. I've cried out, and got all the anger and sadness out of my system. These kind of things happen too. But also, this diet change has made such a profound impact on me that my wife's a vegetarian, so she's like, you're a wacko, right? Which I think is totally, and I'm kind of like, yeah, it's fairly valid. But what I've noticed is that because that reservoir is so high, that just stress is just not as big a part of my life as it used to be. Combined with something like nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, herein lies a peace of God. There's parts of me that say, well, what am I getting stressed about anyway?
Yeah. What does it mean, right? All I can get out of my head now is the dinner table at home for you guys. It's like a ping pong table with a much bigger net in the middle between the two, but the net isn't see through, right? Because it's very different.
I do. I try my best to be respectful of
course,
everyone's. I think it's very fair if someone doesn't want to eat animals.
Yeah,
I'm cool with that
absolutely,
too. More for me. Yep. And also, that's their choice, and I respect it.
100%. And I think that's it. I think there's too much criticism. And again, I always talk about social media, but social media has encouraged this dramatically. But I think, as long as you're doing no harm to anyone or to anything or to even yourself, then you should be allowed to really experience life the way you want to experience it, right? And that may be completely different to others, and that's okay.
Well, we have a blessing that we say sometimes at the dinner table, which is that we give thanks to the living beings that suffered and died against their will to nourish us. And I think that's what I'm sort of summing up is, somebody might say, well, Gillies, you're eating loads of animals, surely that's harmful.
Yes.
But my belief is that, if you look at the population of the earth, 80% of all the animals on earth at one time were carnivorous. Mm-hmm. So I think life eats life wherever you go. Mm-hmm. And I also believe that, it's very hard not to take life if another life wants to live. So even if someone does go to a 100% plant-based diet, there are still deaths involved in that. It's just a different nature of death, a different type of death. Yeah. So it's very hard to avoid death is my point. And I think it's part of the system. And it's just what death you choose to enact in your own way is just take responsibility for that, be part of that, accept it. Don't kid yourself is a kind of part of it for me.
Great, love it. And contention is good, right? I love topics that challenge, get people to rethink, reassess. I think those are positive things, and it doesn't mean, by the way, you have to sit and agree at all, but just making you think about things from a different perspective and a different set of experiences can only be a healthy thing. Okay, so you understood. You've really been instrumental in offering to just help us in the very early part of our journey. We're still trying to figure how we can make the best impact through, of course, the use of advanced and innovative technology, but also by just talking about mental health and life and lived experience. And I think I often kind of refer to branches in life that you can either watch as you drift by, or you can grab onto one. And I think, the way I'd like to see it is that all we're doing is really putting branches into the stream of life. And if people want to, grab hold of one and it's useful to them, then brilliant. And if they want to watch as they drift by, that's also good. So we're still on that journey. We're making huge progress on the technical side. We're getting great guests in like you and talking about mental health. Why, beyond a personal favor to me, why do you think it's important to try and be heard and to have your opinions shape what we're trying to do?
Well, I think what you're actually doing is exactly the first step that most people need to take when they're trying to. When I was trying to improve my state of mind, it was all about awareness. And what you're doing is you're providing a technology. So the phone's always there, right? I got my phone on me now.
Yep.
I'm assuming you've got yours, right?
Yep.
And it's a great bit of kit. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is absolutely phenomenal bit of kit. And this is what I love about the human race. We've really, some of the stuff we've invented is pretty cool. And I do think technology's agnostic. It can be used for good. It can be used for bad.
Absolutely.
It's really up to the person and up to the collective. And so what you've created with You Understood is it's the opportunity to pause, and it's the opportunity to, I think, recount and recall as well, because, as you say, people are busy, right? They are busy. We're self-made busy, or we're busy as a result of external circumstances, whatever you think. But having that ability to look back and maybe have a little more, add meat to the bone, add some. All right, yeah, okay, that's my trend. I can see like I'm kind of making improvements, or I can see actually maybe I'm not, and it's just that opportunity to have that. There's something about an objective piece of, even though it's self-input, there's something about having that objective view of a sort of time horizon that allows me to go, okay, maybe I'm not placing the right importance on certain things, and it just creates more opportunity for pause, and it creates what would I call it? There's an element of an objectiveness to it, which is actually really, really healthy. It's very easy for me to get caught up in thinking that I'm justified in an emotion.
Okay.
Like, I'm angry. I must be justified.
Right.
But actually, it might not be justified at all. In fact, I might be looking at it through a lens that's completely untrue.
Yep.
I might have made a bunch of assumptions about a situation, that are completely, false. So what I love about it is there's an objectivity to how I feel. There has to be, just by logic. And so that's what I love about it, and that's why I'm on board with it.
There's a ton of things that give me stress because there's so many of them in the backlog. And one of the things I've noticed is your justification around emotions. I whether it's at one extreme in the positive sphere or whether it's the other extreme in the negative sphere. Had an experience recently that I captured, a moment in time that I captured, and it was a negative moment. And unusually for me, it was a pretty significant negative emotion that was surrounding this moment in time, and I captured it.
Would you be willing to name it?
It was.
You don't have to say the actual thing, but I mean, like, what was the emotion?
The emotion was anger, and that's something that I rarely, and I mean really rarely, experience. So it kind of caught me a little by surprise, and that's why I felt that I had to capture it so that I could reflect as you were talking. So what I realized the next day was that the emotions that I'd felt had dissipated, and they were far less acute, and life had moved on. But at the time, the rawness of that emotion, and again, you can apply it to any emotion, any adjective, but the rawness of that emotion was very real, right? Perception is reality. And so you talk about justification, but one of the things that we've got in our backlog is being able to what we call layer. So once you've put a moment in time in, it's unique and it's authentic because it's the way you felt, and you've articulated that as best you can on that moment in time and in that record. But time moves on, emotions move on, and the ability to reflect on that particular moment through reflection is something we're calling layering. So you can then go back into that moment in time and not edit, because the authenticity of the moment for you and the user we believe to be very important, but the ability to reflect and lay on top a different set of emotions that are surrounded by different context, and with time having passed, we feel will be incredibly strong for people to look at how they change. And it's kind of in line with the year at a glance mood map that we have, is that when you're having a tough day or a good day, it can be all consuming. It can be all consuming, and you're never getting out of it, and the feelings you have are never going to go away, and it's awful. But actually you wake up the next day and it's not quite the same. I'm not saying everything's rosy and there's flowers outside, but something's changed. And being able to recognize that those changes happen, sometimes acutely and over a short period of time, but other times over a longer period of time, is really important when you're going through an emotion at the time. Recognizing the fact that those feelings will change over time, perspective becomes different, reflection becomes different, and experiences beyond that moment in time that you're experiencing are going to change, probably significantly. So as you look back with a different set of lenses, and probably multiple lenses. So does that sound like a good backlog item to have in? Or
that is, yeah. So the human mind is looks through perception, right? There's a filtering. Mm-hmm. There's a filtering, mm-hmm. right? So I'm looking at you. I can only take in so much information. Yep. I can only remember so much. I won't go away and be able to recite what you've said word for word, yep. Will I?
Well, I'm pretty sure you will, based on what I've heard today. But
unless I've got a photographic memory, which is quite a rare thing in the population. So ultimately, because of that selective listening, memory, retention, having something that allows me to make that recording and then go back and go, was I genuinely?
Absolutely.
And actually, that self-review, that self-reflection, is the absolute gold. It really is the gold, because I can look at that and go, okay, anger 9 out of 10, or anger 7 out of 10, or sadness 8 out of 10. But I can also then on on reflecting on that, I can also see that there's a joy, there's a positivity that comes from looking at something and going, oh, that wasn't really a 9 out of 10 at all. And actually, as that situation may crop up again, it doesn't have to be a 9 out of 10. It can be a 3 out of 10.
Absolutely.
It can be a 9 out of 10, or it can be an 8 out of 10, and the next time a 7 out of 10, and the next time a 6 out of 10. It doesn't really have to, I don't have to make some big step change either. No. And so, no, I love it. I think that's, I love that concept, layering. I'd never come across that.
Yeah, there's many more. We'll talk about those another time. But we really just appreciate you offering to help and really positive feedback so far. So thank you so much, and thank you again for showing up today despite my lack of organisation. Okay, so I can't move forward, and we're gonna push the boundaries again here, if you don't mind. But I want to touch on what I'm seeing out there in the market around psychedelics. And I know you've got your own view and your own experiences on them, but from what and you'll have to forgive me and my ignorance here, but from what I can understand, they've been used as a medicine and a way of altering perception of life for a very long time, and up to present day we've probably had 30-40 years where they've been vilified, I guess, as a drug, as something that shouldn't be touched, and goodness me, if you go near them you're in big trouble, right? But there's now, as I talk, there's a huge amount of work and of research and study being done around the benefits of psychedelics. So in my naive world, I look at, and again, this is uneducated, so forgive me, but I look at the amount of off-the-shelf drugs that are being prescribed to the global population, particularly as it relates to mental health, in vast quantities, and I shudder at that alone. That cannot be the answer short, mid, long term. The problem's getting worse and more challenging. It's not getting better. So could you share some of your experiences, your thoughts, your beliefs on psychedelics, and maybe how you feel, if at all, they have a role to play in someone's journey through life?
Cool. So I like the stoned ape theory.
Okay.
Stoned ape theory is great fun.
Okay.
So I think this is Terence McKenna that came up with this, who's a well-known psychonaut, as you call him. So stoned ape theory effectively goes that we would be hunting large prey, very large prey, land animals, large ruminant animals normally. They eat a lot of vegetation. These animals are chewing 80-90% of their waking day. If anyone's ever spent any time with an elephant, they'll know an elephant just eats all the time, right? Because they're huge and they've got to maintain that mass, and they do it through fermenting the vegetation they eat. And that they turn it into short-chain fatty acids, and that's what makes them big and powerful. So they're eating all day, and they're also defecating all day. So how would you find a large animal to hunt and kill and eat? Well, you'd probably follow its poo, right? You'd follow its dung.
Yep.
And what grows in dung? Well, interestingly, mushrooms do.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of it's just a fun theory. It might mean nothing.
Yep.
But we're hunting, we're following along, and oh look, there's something. What is that? I don't know what it is. Here, John, why don't you try that? John always tries everything. John gives it a go. Oh, John's off to some spacey wonderland. What's that all about? So there's a sort of view that potentially these psychedelic, primarily mushrooms, would have potentially started off us seeing new visions and developing our language capabilities and our creative abilities to begin problem solving in new ways and to create new technologies. So, well, that spear's okay, it's a bit crooked, let's have a straighter spear, or whatever it might be, right? Now, I think that has a little bit of weight to it.
Yep.
I mean, to what degree an entire an entire species, I mean, I don't know how many humans were around at the time, couldn't have been that many. But
five or six?
It could have been, yeah. Yeah, maybe. And you know, it's just a fun theory, but the point being is that it's well understood that psychedelics now, when they've imaged regions of the brain, light the brain up. Okay, it's clear that that's what's happening. And my personal experience of them has been that that's exactly what they do. They're like a sort of they turn on. I think they just kind of open up all the channels, all the available channels: hearing, sight, taste, touch, smell. They just open it all up, and there's just an inpouring of data, and that data can start to get a bit funky looking, and you know, people can hallucinate and see all sorts of things.
But it's an enhanced awareness.
So I think it starts there, yes.
Okay.
So like any chemical in the body, there's always going to be a fulcrum. There's going to be a point where it's fun,
Yep.
and then it's no longer fun.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So, you know, people have had horrendous trips on,
Yep.
you know, mushrooms and LSD and these things where they've really had a bad time. And I suspect that's got to do largely with the dose and the setting, as opposed to, you know, somebody who's respectful with that particular chemical or that particular drug or medicine. You can use all sorts of labels. So done respectfully and done well, I think that the opening up of these channels is a profound experience for most people. And certainly for me, I mean, the thing that I immediately became aware of was the connectedness of everything, the real, genuine connectedness of everything. And physically, it makes a lot of sense to me, because the space in between every atom is technically connected to the space in every other atom.
Yes.
Everywhere in the universe.
Yes.
So physically it makes sense to some degree, but it's not a physical connection. It's the connection through space. So you and I are completely connected. But I'll give another example. If we look at the Ukraine war, which is a terrible thing to happen, and a war on any scale in any place, I think, is absolutely tragic. That is having a profound impact across the whole world.
Absolutely.
Whether you want it to or not,
connected,
we're all in it together.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it doesn't, I can say, oh, well, it's not in my back garden, but it is.
It is.
It is in my back garden. It's coming right for me.
Yeah.
And that's the responsibility that I feel, you know, strongly about. But equally, that's what psychedelics have given me. They've given me a sort of real lived experience, tangible, I can kind of grasp it, feeling of being completely connected. And that feeling, it doesn't go away. I haven't noticed it massively diminish or tail off, or I've tried to change my mind about it or anything like that.
So it's kind of push the graphic equalizer up, if you like.
Everything.
Show my age now.
It's all,
But it stays there. Is that what you're saying?
That's what it does. I think it keeps the doors open for quite a long time.
Okay.
I do think it can fade, but I think that lived experience is very hard to like change or get rid of. And so the counter to that is, you know, someone's not feeling well mentally, so they go to the doctor prescribes them, you know, an antidepressant or an SSRI or whatever it is of some kind. But they don't get the interconnectedness along with that drug.
Yep.
So I'm not saying the drugs don't have any utility. They clearly have value, or else people wouldn't use them.
Yep.
But they're only a small part of the problem. They're just saying, well, we're going to remove how you feel about the problem, but we're not going to offer the deeper solution, which is that when I felt completely connected to all things, which is quite an experience, it suddenly put a lot of other things in perspective, and it certainly put that acute situation in perspective.
You and I share very strongly, I feel, that connectedness of everything. And I would quite happily describe that as a kind of a spiritual sense.
Yeah.
And I think it ties into a word you used a little while ago, which is respect, and difference of being. So we share that. The question I have, I guess, because I haven't got experience on psychedelics at all, but I feel like I've always had that innately in me. And the question I was curious really about with you is that, spiritually, was that there prior to your experience with psychedelics, or do you think it was there but it needed to be nurtured, or actually it was always there, it was always strong, and this has just enhanced it and made it a more enriched sense of belief?
It's a good question. So for me personally, I would say I had an atheistic perspective,
Yep.
a very, maybe potentially anti-religious view of the world when prior to any experimentation with psychedelics. But it was the practice of going internally first that actually really made the difference.
Okay.
Psychedelics are, like many things, it's an adjunct, it's an add-on, an extra. It will never, and I think it can't possibly take the place of doing the hard work yourself.
Yes. Okay.
So the practice of actually taking the pause, going within, experiencing what's inside, having a search, having some time for that, it is still profoundly more enjoyable than the kind of forced nature that a drug creates.
Yep.
I still think it's of benefit to anyone to try psychedelics, obviously of an adult mind and of, in a safe setting with people that you trust, or, with family or something like that. But it's only ever going to be a little bit of a bit of fun, really, I think.
Yep.
I think that the real work for me came when we went into lockdown and I really struggled with it. That's when I started to really challenge who I was, what I was about. That's when I started to go inside a lot more. So this is all quite new for me. I would just like to say that. It's not like I'm some, doing it for 20 years, some, guru sitting on a hill somewhere. I'm just a guy, that's found some stuff that's worked for him, So it definitely was the personal exploration of the spiritual journey first. A lot of what I really like is the teachings of Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if Tolle is the right way to say his name. Tolle, some people say Tolle. That for me was the real change, and then the psychedelics kind of came after that a little bit, because I thought, okay, I'd like to try them together. I'd like to try what it's like to do that together to enhance the already really rich experience. And, it was phenomenal. I mean, it was just a magical experience. It just completely changed my view on a lot of things,
So we haven't got time for my quantum entanglement piece then. So lots of people are going to be listening to this, watching this, and what I always like to ask is, if you were to give somebody just a little bit of advice, again, not the silver bullet, it feels to me that you're saying, find time and space and peace of mind to just have a bit of self-discovery, introspection, because by doing that, you're giving yourself a great shot at being able to cope with everyday life. Is that fair, or would you kind of extend it, or give them a different piece of advice on how they could take, very small steps to try and tackle their challenges, to tackle their environment, to tackle their stress levels?
Okay, so one practical thing.
Go for it.
If they've got a set of steps in their house, stairs in their house.
Yep. I haven't, so now I feel left out.
Dang it. Have you got any in the front door?
I've got some in the back garden.
Back garden.
Okay.
Cool. I mean, most people have got a step somewhere. So we'll go with that, right?
Okay.
One step is enough.
I'm there, okay.
The next time you go up the stairs or step out in the garden or wherever it might be, irrelevant really, feel every step. Just feel every single step. Take your time, go really slowly, and feel every single step. Really be in the body. Just quieten that mind down. Forget about where you're going. Forget about what the destination might be. Feel the step. That's it. That one practice has been the big difference for me between the stress of being in the past, dwelling on the past, and the stress of, thinking about the future, to just being present. And it doesn't have to be for very long. It just has to be a moment in time. And that first experience of that process should, I hope, set off a desire to continue to do that. It could be when you get in the car and you just take 10 seconds, shut the door, 10 seconds, no one else is there, if you're on your own obviously, and just be there. Be there just for a very short period of time. And there's no right way to do it, there's no wrong way to do it. You can't really mess it up. It's just something that you put in every day, and I've put in every day to my life. So that's what I would do, a practical thing to do.
I love that. And it reminds me, it evokes memories of a time that I had recently on the beach, lucky enough to live next to the coast. And it sounds like a really, well, yeah, of course, why wouldn't you? But I took the shoes off and was just walking with my bare feet on the sand, and that sounds so shruggy shoulders, but it was profound for me. I felt a sense of connectedness with the environment. It was a different sensation. It was a sensation that I rarely get to experience, and it was a really deep sense of tranquility that I often search for, but don't find. So you're taking a moment, your advice on taking that step and really just taking the time to take it all in, take some time to really think about things, be in that moment, be present, I think is gold. Gillies, I had so much more stuff, but we are definitely out of time. I'm already, by the way, being criticised for the length of the podcasts. Generally, I talk too much, apparently. So I want to thank you again. Please come along again. We can maybe touch on some of the other subjects we didn't get to touch upon today. There's a whole raft of things that we're up to technically. Continue to value and encourage your feedback on the progress there, good and bad. It's both welcome. But thank you so much for coming along.
My pleasure, Paul. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it a lot.
Have a good one. All right, cheers.